Beware of loners who keep no friends. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. That profound wisdom from Michel de Montaigne captures the essence of the inner journey. But what happens when belonging to oneself crosses the line into complete, unbroken isolation? Welcome back to Spiritual Wisdom. Today, we are diving deep into a challenging and uncomfortable truth that lies behind our video title, Beware of Loners Who Keep No Friends. This isn't about judgment. It's about discerning the vital spiritual principles that either fuel your personal growth and inner peace or secretly sabotage your long-term happiness. Do you believe extreme solitude is the ultimate path to enlightenment, or a dangerous trap that blinds us to necessary connection? Let me know your thoughts in the comments right now. And stick around as we uncover the crucial wisdom you can apply to your daily life starting today. 1. The loner is not broken, but selective. Have you ever looked at someone who walks alone, the quiet observer in the corner? The one who politely declines most invitations and felt a pang of curiosity, maybe even concern? Society often rushes to label these individuals as loners, assuming they must be broken, damaged, or simply incapable of forming connections. But what if the very isolation that makes us uneasy is not a sign of deficit, but a profound indication of strength and a deep commitment to one's spiritual awakening? Let's dive into the profound truth about those who keep no friends and discover why their solitude is not a shield of fear, but a fortress of spiritual wisdom. The core message we must grasp is that the genuine loner is not broken, but profoundly selective. It's a common misconception that a person without a wide social circle is suffering from a deficiency, a lack of social skills, or perhaps a fear of intimacy. On the contrary, this wisdom suggests that the selective individual is often operating from a place of higher discernment. They have chosen to prioritize their peace and inner life over the clamor of constant, often superficial, social interaction. Think of the ancient Greek philosopher Diogenes, who chose to live simply in a barrel. When Alexander the Great offered him anything he desired, Diogenes famously replied, "Stand out of my light." This wasn't rudeness. It was the ultimate assertion of prioritizing the quality of his inner world and essential needs over the distractions of external, power-driven social structures. This individual's choice of solitude is a silent but powerful vote against low-quality or toxic companionship. They are acutely aware that settling for relationships that drain their energy, compromise their authenticity, or distract from their higher purpose is a far greater detriment than walking a path alone. This radical selectivity is precisely what often triggers discomfort and even resentment in the people around them, adding another layer to the enigma of the loner. The presence of a self-contained, solitary person can feel like a direct, personal rejection to those who value broad social integration above all else. When a loner chooses not to engage with the surrounding social environment, it subtly but powerfully implies that the current social offerings, the gossip, the drama, the lack of depth, are not meeting a high enough standard. This perceived judgment is difficult for many to accept, as it forces them to momentarily question the quality and meaning of their own bustling social lives. The loner is not just saying, "I don't need you," but perhaps more uncomfortably, "I am choosing something better than what this dynamic offers." This highly focused and intentional life choice is often a marker of genuine growth in spirituality, where external validation is replaced by an internal certainty. The path of true spiritual awakening often necessitates a period of withdrawal and introspection, where one must filter out the world's noise to hear the gentle, true voice of the soul. Therefore, the person who seemingly keeps no friends may simply be keeping the most important friend of all, their own uncompromised inner self, making space for a connection far deeper than any casual acquaintance could provide. This isn't about isolation from the world, but rather an insulation from the non-essential, allowing their energy to be conserved for meaningful creation, self-discovery, and eventual, purposeful contribution to the world that transcends mere socializing. 2. Loneliness is a result of past trauma and abuse. It is vital for you to grasp that the choice to become a loner, someone you observe keeping no close friends, is rarely a preference, but rather a profound consequence of enduring past trauma and abuse. When you look at an individual who deliberately distances themselves from intimacy, you are often seeing someone who has been repeatedly hurt, used, and betrayed, not by strangers, but by those who should have been safe: friends, family members, and partners. This relentless cycle taught them a painful, crucial lesson: that people will routinely take advantage of them, dismiss their true feelings, and engage with them only when they require something. Consequently, they learn to erect ironclad defenses, effectively choosing to stop trusting and stop tolerating toxicity as a fundamental means of self-preservation. This emotional wall they've built is not an indicator of arrogance. It's a necessary fortress constructed for survival. The profound wisdom in understanding this perspective lies in recognizing that their perceived solitude is an avoidance of further emotional devastation, rather than a genuine desire for isolation. Their current state of being was essentially dictated by the destructive actions of others, shattering their core sense of safety. They have internalized the powerful, yet isolating philosophy that the only person I can truly rely on is myself, transforming self-reliance into their most dependable armor. While this shield successfully wards off external harm, it simultaneously inhibits the kind of vulnerability required for genuine connection, forcing their journey toward openness to be an agonizingly slow process of painstakingly rebuilding trust. The health of a person's relationships is directly mirrored by their self-worth and their interpersonal history. When someone is constantly subjected to gaslighting, manipulation, and the persistent invalidation of their feelings, they inevitably start to doubt their own reality. This creates a painful sense of perpetual misunderstanding where, despite being in a room full of people, they still feel alone, because the company is emotionally hazardous or deeply inauthentic. Their retreat into isolation, therefore, becomes a critical, desperate move to reclaim their sanity and internal peace by separating themselves entirely from the source of the emotional chaos. What appears outwardly as antisocial behavior is, in fact, an intense act of personal affirmation and a rigorous prioritization of their mental well-being over social conformity. For someone committed to spiritual development, this enforced solitude, though born from suffering, transforms into an intense crucible for self-discovery. In the quiet, dramatic absence of external validation, they are propelled inward, discovering a core of inner strength previously untouched. They evolve into master observers, gaining an almost painful clarity in discerning true human character, and this elevated awareness explains their extreme selectivity regarding who they permit into their lives. They are no longer seeking casual company. They are vetting for souls who operate with a level of sincerity and authenticity that their past experiences convinced them was mythical. While their initial withdrawal was a reaction to profound hurt, their continued solitude evolves into a deliberate, conscious commitment to their spirituality, a commitment to an inner existence where their boundaries are sacred and their peace is non-negotiable. Therefore, you must approach the person who seemingly keeps no friends with a cautious respect, not because they pose a danger, but because they are fiercely guarded and possess an uncompromising intolerance for disrespect. They have already performed the excruciating work of purging the toxic elements from their lives, and they will not hesitate to repeat that process with you if your actions remotely mirror their past pain. Their criteria for genuine connection are extraordinarily high because they understand firsthand the catastrophic cost of lowering them. They have been refined by fire, and that crucible has solidified them into someone who values quality above all else, leaving you with this powerful takeaway. Never allow the fear of being lonely to trap you within toxic company. 3. Loners value self-respect and peace above all. The individual who consciously chooses the path of solitude is not merely avoiding company. They are engaged in an uncompromising defense of their intrinsic worth, a subtle yet fierce battle for self-respect and inner peace. This decision is rooted in a profound, often painful, realization that emotional energy is their most valuable currency, and they will no longer tolerate environments, be they professional, familial, or social, that demand payment in the form of manipulation, calculated deceit, or chronic disrespect. They have observed the draining cycles of modern interaction and concluded that genuine connection is too rare to justify the constant exposure to those who would treat them as emotionally expendable or merely as temporary props in their own personal dramas. For these self-sovereign souls, the clarity of being alone is far superior to the confusion and moral compromise that often attends superficial companionship. They understand that their hard-won tranquility, the spiritual capital accumulated through years of navigating interpersonal turbulence, is a treasure to be guarded above all else. This resolute commitment means that when faced with an issue or a pattern of behavior that violates their core values, their response is swift and decisive. They simply leave. This departure is executed without fanfare, without the energy expenditure of arguments, and without the need for theatrical explanations. It is a mature, self-protective strategy born not of coldness, but of an absolute refusal to negotiate their boundaries. This quiet exit is the ultimate expression of autonomy, a declaration that their internal state is not dependent on validating or fixing the external disorder. They possess a deep, intuitive understanding that engaging in conflict often gives the aggressor precisely the power and attention they crave. By removing themselves entirely, the solitary person reclaims full jurisdiction over their own emotional landscape. As the influential Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once noted, "The greatest part of your hurt comes from your own imagination, and if you would but correct this, you would have almost no trouble at all. The loner applies this spiritual wisdom by correcting the imaginative error of believing they must stay and fight for respect that should have been freely given. They have internalized the psychological truth that authentic selfhood thrives not in the noise of approval, but in the silence of self-reflection. Furthermore, their life is often characterized by a rich, complex internal dialogue, aligning with the insights of Carl Jung, who posited that true individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated self, requires confronting and assimilating the shadow aspects of the psyche, a journey that is fundamentally solitary. Their primary allegiance is to this internal quest for wholeness, making external social demands feel trivial by comparison. Consequently, the peace they defend is not merely the absence of conflict, it is the presence of an integrated, uncompromised self, a profound state that they will never jeopardize for the fleeting comfort of company. 4. Early pain sharpens intuition and boundaries. The journey toward profound self-reliance, often mistaken for mere aloofness, is actually the forging of an internal sentinel, an intuition so meticulously calibrated by past adversity that it functions as a potent, emotional radar. This isn't a mere innate gift. It is a defensive mechanism, upgraded through experience into a form of higher perception. Each misstep, each act of trust betrayed, has contributed to a deep, sophisticated archive of human behavior, transforming pain into an acute sixth sense. This individual's mind has become an expert in deciphering the subtext, effortlessly reading the unsaid language of subtle body cues and minute vocal shifts that signal insincerity or transactional intent. They possess a sophisticated level of pattern recognition that allows them to move beyond the surface gloss of social interactions and immediately recognize the underlying architecture of deceit, spotting manipulation before the first friendly gesture is even complete. The experience of individuals like Marcus, for example, who develop the capacity to discern true intent within minutes of introduction, is emblematic of this refined state. For him, the tell was not loud or obvious, but a minuscule hesitation, a fleeting glance toward a perceived object of value when discussing a potential partnership, a subtle yet undeniable cue that confirmed his innate suspicion that the person was engaging in a negotiation, not a relationship. While many interpret smooth talking as effortless charm, the seasoned loner registers it as a potential performance, a veneer that demands cautious investigation, and this capacity to quickly spot hidden motives and fake friendliness that the majority overlooks is not cynical, but profoundly and critically observant, marking a pivotal moment in their spiritual awakening as they align their judgment with truth. Consequently, this profound understanding of human nature dictates an equally formidable external posture. If their intuition is the finely tuned alarm system, then their personal boundaries are made of reinforced steel. This isn't a hyperbolic phrase. It encapsulates the unbreakable resolve born from the painful realization that vulnerability, when carelessly or repeatedly misplaced, leads inevitably to exploitation. They learned the undeniable axiom that nice gets you used, not appreciated, often after enduring repeated instances of being drained or taken advantage of. For the person who has consistently given too much, only to be left emotionally and energetically depleted, the necessary shift from porous boundaries to an unyielding defense becomes an essential and non-negotiable spiritual act of self-reverence. It is this history that allows them to be unapologetically clear about their needs and limitations, refusing to equivocate or apologize for upholding their emotional and energetic standards. Unlike those who habitually lower their boundaries to maintain artificial harmony or win fleeting social approval, the genuine loner understands that compromise in this area is a form of spiritual self-betrayal, a concession that dilutes their hard-won peace. Their steadfast refusal to allow others to encroach upon their quiet strength is a testament to the rigorous internal work they have undertaken, ensuring their inner well of energy remains intact and undiluted by the unexamined demands of the world. They operate from a position of radical self-respect, knowing that anyone who truly values them will respect the fortress they have built. And this stringent self-governance is not evidence of isolation, but rather a necessary prerequisite for deep spirituality, solidifying their independence and their capacity for quiet, formidable strength. 5. Self-reliance is their uncontrollable strength. You must grasp that the journey of an individual who learned self-reliance out of necessity, like the one referenced, navigating their younger years without consistent backing, forges an uncontrollable strength that is profoundly intimidating to the average person. This wasn't a cushioned upbringing. It was a rugged apprenticeship in self-sufficiency, forcing them to become their own primary comforter, therapist, and problem solver. Think deeply about this. They cultivated an internal system capable of meeting their own needs, which means they are simply not starving for connection in the typical sense. Their entire existence is a testament to the fact that they have already faced and conquered the primal fear of abandonment. Consequently, they embody a singular, uncomfortable truth. Someone who doesn't need you cannot be controlled or manipulated, particularly not with the common relational weapons of threatening withdrawal or dangling the promise of companionship. This emotional invulnerability is the very core of their power. They cannot be blackmailed by loneliness, making them resilient against interpersonal leverage used by those accustomed to trading approval for compliance. This deep, hard-won self-reliance is the foundation of their spiritual development, enabling a singular focus unavailable to those constantly managing external expectations. Since they are not expending vast amounts of energy seeking validation or adhering to the ever-shifting rules of complex social games, that energy is naturally channeled inward toward profound introspection and personal growth. They stand sovereign in their emotional landscape, choosing their relationships based on genuine resonance and shared values, not born of a desperate need to fill a void. This independence elevates the quality of their connections, transforming friendships from crutches into truly mutual, enriching additions to an already complete life. The individual, often perceived as a loner, has, in reality, mastered the distinction between being alone, a chosen state of being, and being lonely, a state of mind, emerging as a whole, stable entity. Their quiet strength arises from the clear, unhurried path this lifestyle affords, allowing them to cultivate a rich inner life and a clear vision, unobscured by the noise and demands of constant social maintenance. This ability to derive happiness and stability purely from internal sources marks the apex of emotional and spiritual wisdom, distinguishing them as profoundly powerful figures who operate from a place of radical authenticity. This sovereignty isn't a form of arrogance, but rather a mature acknowledgement that they are the sole, absolute guarantors of their own well-being. They do not operate on borrowed emotional stability. Their commitment to their own truth, refined by years of solitary reflection, means that their actions and choices are driven by an internal compass that is unswayed by external pressure or popular opinion. It is this absolute self-possession that makes them appear intimidating. They represent a level of freedom that often mirrors the unaddressed vulnerabilities in others. They are not chasing happiness. They are manufacturing it from within, making their presence a silent challenge to anyone who believes their security depends on the whims of the world or the presence of others. Therefore, the loner who keeps few friends is less a social anomaly and more a master practitioner of emotional integrity and personal power, having achieved a rare and powerful state of true self-determination. 6. The real warning: they cannot be manipulated. The true essence of the traditional warning, "Beware of loners who keep no friends," is fundamentally misunderstood by a society that values interconnectedness over self-reliance. It is not a caution against danger, but an expression of profound societal discomfort with an individual who exists outside the framework of control. The solitary soul, you see, is inherently unmanipulatable. This absolute independence stems from a crucial spiritual wisdom they have acquired. They have faced, endured, and ultimately conquered the terror of genuine solitude. Having traversed the psychological landscape of emptiness and emerged whole, the loner no longer regards the presence of others as a requirement for emotional stability or physical survival. Consequently, the most powerful social tool, the threat of withdrawal or exclusion, is rendered completely inert. If they do not fear losing you, if their well-being is not contingent upon your validation, then you hold no leverage over them whatsoever. This self-sovereignty is what makes them formidable in social dynamics. Their inability to be played, fooled, or controlled marks them as an anomaly in environments where interpersonal influence is the silent currency. What this translates to is an uncompromising standard of self-respect that others often perceive as arrogance or detachment. The deeper, truthful message being conveyed by the uneasy social gaze is: beware of people who value their inner peace and integrity too highly to tolerate your superficiality or emotional demands. These individuals are not simply avoiding people. They are meticulously curating their environment to protect a hard-won internal clarity. The loner is frequently seen as evolved because their current state is often the result of consciously transforming past negative experiences, heartache, or trauma into sharp, discerning self-awareness and an unshakable sense of freedom. They refuse to use others as crutches or mirrors, preferring instead the often painful honesty of introspection. It is this very process of internal work that grants them the insight to quickly detect and dismiss insincerity, emotional maneuvering, and transactional relationships. This commitment to the self aligns powerfully with the psychological insights of Carl Jung, who spent his life exploring the journey toward individuation, the process of becoming a unified, distinct whole. Jung's work suggests that true psychological health requires confronting the depths of the unconscious and integrating the self, a journey often best undertaken in solitude. This is not selfish retreat. It is necessary self-actualization. The loner, in embracing this path, is embodying a form of radical honesty that can be profoundly unsettling to those whose identities are heavily invested in external roles or collective approval. Their lack of neediness disrupts the social contract which presumes mutual dependence. As the great philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once observed, a sentiment that crystallizes the loner's position. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. The loner has solved this despair by courageously choosing to be exactly who they are, unbound by the expectations of an external audience. They are not chasing fulfillment from the outside. They are drawing it from an inexhaustible internal well. This complete self-possession makes them the ultimate free agent in life, and that freedom is the source of both their quiet power and the subconscious apprehension they elicit from the world. Their existence serves as a silent challenge to everyone else. If they can stand alone and thrive, what is truly stopping you from doing the same? This is the spiritual wisdom embedded in their solitude, a lesson in autonomy that society often seeks to marginalize because it threatens the fabric of conventional influence. If this video helped illuminate a path or spark a new thought, please give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from this spiritual wisdom. And don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos as we continue to explore life's most profound topics. Thank you for watching, and may your path be blessed with both peace and connection. Why loners are magnets for toxic people. Carl Jung once famously said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." It is a profound paradox. Why is it that those who seek peace and solitude often end up surrounded by chaos and manipulation? If you identify as a loner or a deep thinker, you may have noticed a pattern where your empathy becomes a beacon for those who wish to drain your energy. Is this simply bad luck? Or is there a deeper psychological force at play, perhaps a dance between your light and their shadow? Welcome back to Spiritual Wisdom. Today, we are applying the profound teachings of Carl Jung to uncover why this magnetic attraction exists, and more importantly, how you can reclaim your boundaries. Before we dive in, I have a question for you. Have you ever felt that your silence was misinterpreted as weakness by a toxic person? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's support each other as we unravel this mystery. 1. No social army. The lone target. Have you ever found yourself wondering why, in your pursuit of peace and solitude, you seem to inadvertently attract the most chaotic and manipulative individuals into your life? It is a paradox that often baffles those who walk the path of introspection. But the answer lies deep within the dynamics of human psychology and the energy we project. When you commit yourself to a journey of true spirituality, you naturally begin to detach from the superficial noise of the crowd, seeking a deeper connection with the self and the universe. However, this sacred withdrawal often creates a vacuum that predatory personalities are all too eager to fill. The specific vulnerability lies in the absence of what we might call a social army, a concept that is crucial to understanding why you may have become a target. In the ordinary world, the average person moves through life surrounded by a protective buffer, a network of friends, family members, co-workers, and acquaintances who act as a defensive perimeter. This social circle functions not just for companionship, but as a system of checks and balances, a collection of objective observers who validate reality. When a person with a strong social army begins to date or befriend a toxic individual, there are witnesses watching. If the toxic person attempts to manipulate, lie, or mistreat their target, there is a chorus of voices ready to step in and say, "That is not right," or "You deserve better." These witnesses act as a safety net, spotting the red flags that the victim might miss because of emotional attachment. However, for the loner, particularly one who is undergoing a profound spiritual awakening, this safety net is often non-existent or intentionally dismantled. You may have distanced yourself from former associates to align better with your higher purpose, or perhaps you simply find solace in the quiet of your own company. While this solitude is a source of strength and wisdom, toxic people view it through a completely different lens. To them, your isolation is not a sign of independence, but an invitation. They perceive the loner as a high-value target specifically because there are no witnesses to their behavior. They understand that in your world, there is no one around to warn you, no one to point out the inconsistencies in their stories, and no one to validate your feelings when they begin the subtle process of gaslighting. Without a social army to act as a mirror reflecting the truth back to you, the toxic person knows they can distort your reality with frightening ease. They realize that if they manage to hurt you, confuse you, or drain your energy, there will be no cavalry coming over the hill to rescue you. It is just you and them. This dynamic essentially transforms the spiritual seeker into what can be metaphorically described as a lone gazelle. In the wild, a predator rarely attacks the herd directly because the collective eyes and ears of the group make success difficult and dangerous. Instead, they scan the horizon for the one creature that has wandered away from the safety of the pack. The toxic person operates on this exact same primal instinct. They are looking for the path of least resistance, and the loner represents a scenario where they can exert total control without the interference of third-party judgments. They know that without friends to act as a sounding board, you are more likely to internalize their toxicity, blaming yourself for the chaos they bring rather than seeing it for what it objectively is. This is not to say that your solitude is a flaw in fact. It is a necessary component of your growth and spirituality, but it is vital to recognize that this very independence signals to the toxic mind that you are unprotected. They see your lack of a witness as a tactical advantage, allowing them to isolate you further and accelerate their manipulation tactics without fear of exposure. Therefore, understanding that you are being viewed as a lone gazelle is not about fear, but about awareness. It is about realizing that your lack of a social army requires you to be doubly vigilant, trusting your own intuition as your primary defender as you navigate the complexities of human connection. 2. The challenge of independence. When you walk through this life content in your own company, you inevitably emit a frequency of strength that is rare in this noisy world. And this self-sufficiency often becomes a beacon for those who are drowning in their own insecurities. You see, True loners do not seek external validation or attention because they have found a home within themselves. However, toxic people observe this quiet confidence not with admiration, but as a direct challenge to their fragile egos. To a narcissist or an energy vampire, your independence is an affront because it proves that a person can survive and thrive without their influence, and this terrifying reality drives them to view you as a mountain they simply must conquer. They do not want to be your friend or your partner in the traditional sense. Rather, they want to be the one person, the single source upon whom you eventually become dependent. It is a twisted game of power where they perceive your boundaries as walls to be breached and your silence as a code to be broken. They are drawn to you because breaking a strong, independent person gives the toxic person a massive ego boost, a temporary high that validates their false sense of superiority. When you are focused on your spirituality and spiritual development, you naturally detach from the drama and the chaotic games that others play. But paradoxically, this detachment makes you even more attractive to those who thrive on chaos. They look at you and see a puzzle. They wonder why their usual tricks of manipulation and flattery do not work on you. And this curiosity quickly morphs into an obsession to dismantle the very foundation of your self-worth. They believe that if they can make a self-sufficient person like you crave their approval, then they must truly be special, powerful, and important. It is important to understand that their pursuit is not about affection, but about colonization. They want to occupy your mind and control your emotions because your autonomy reminds them of their own inner emptiness. As you deepen your spiritual development, you will realize that these encounters are not random bad luck, but are actually tests of your resolve and clarity. These individuals are trying to drag you back down into the transactional world where relationships are based on debt and dependency, whereas you are striving for a world of freedom and authentic connection. The toxic person sees your light that clear, steady flame of someone who knows who they are, and they feel an uncontrollable urge to blow it out, or, at the very least, to make it flicker so they can say they controlled the wind. They will probe your armor, looking for the slightest crack, perhaps a hidden insecurity or a momentary lapse in judgment, and they will hammer at that weak point, relentlessly hoping to create a dependency where none existed before. They want to be the architect of your reality, the gatekeeper to your happiness, and the sole provider of your emotional needs. When you refuse to play this game, when you stand firm in your sovereignty, you inadvertently trigger their deepest wounds of rejection and worthlessness, causing them to double down on their efforts to win you over or destroy your peace. This dynamic explains why you, as someone who asks for nothing, often find yourself besieged by those who demand everything. It is because your very existence proves that their worldview, one where everyone is a puppet to be manipulated, is false. Your spiritual path is one of liberation, and to the jailer, the free soul is the ultimate threat. Therefore, you must recognize that this challenge they perceive is actually a projection of their own internal war. And by seeing it clearly, you can step aside and let them fight their shadows alone while you continue your ascent. Has your solitude ever been misunderstood by others? If so, share your story below so others know they aren't alone. If you are ready to embrace your power, comment, I am strong, and join our community of awakened souls. 3. The trap of being a good listener. Have you ever found yourself sitting across from someone, feeling the heavy weight of their words piling up on your shoulders, while you sit there in silence, unable to find a polite exit? It is a scenario that many of us who identify as loners know all too well, and it stems from a trait that is usually celebrated as a virtue: the ability to truly listen. However, there is a hidden danger lurking within this quiet strength, a specific dynamic that explains why your calm demeanor often attracts the most chaotic storms. As we dive into this analysis, drawing upon deep spiritual wisdom, we must recognize that your comfort with silence is exactly what makes you a beacon for those who cannot stand the quiet of their own minds. To a loner, silence is a sanctuary, a place of restoration and peace. But to a toxic person, your silence is not a boundary. It is an empty stage, an invitation for them to step up and perform their endless monologues. When you offer your silence to a toxic individual, they do not see it as an opportunity for mutual reflection. They see it as a void that they are entitled to fill with their complaints, their dramas, and their negativity. This is where the trap of being a good listener snaps shut. You become a magnet for what psychologists often call emotional dumping. Unlike a healthy conversation, which operates like a game of tennis with a back-and-forth exchange of energy and ideas, emotional dumping is entirely one-sided. You are no longer a participant in a dialogue. You have been unknowingly recruited as an unpaid therapist. The toxic person uses your patience to offload their psychological garbage, leaving them feeling lighter and relieved, while you walk away feeling heavy, drained, and psychologically exhausted. As the great Carl Jung once profoundly stated, the encounter with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. Toxic people run from their own shadows, and they use you, the quiet observer, as a place to project that darkness so they do not have to face it themselves. It is crucial to understand that this dynamic is not accidental. Toxic individuals often lack the emotional maturity to process their own feelings, so they seek out containers of people who will hold that emotional volatility for them. Because you, as a loner, possess a deep capacity for introspection and empathy, you naturally signal that you can handle depth. However, these individuals abuse that capacity. They exploit your polite nature and your reluctance to interrupt. They mistake your silence for agreement and your patience for permission. You might find yourself listening to the same stories, the same grievances, and the same victim narratives for hours on end, without ever being asked how you are doing or what you are thinking. This imbalance is the hallmark of a parasitic relationship, where one person feeds off the energy of the other. This brings us to a vital piece of spiritual wisdom. Compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. By allowing yourself to be the eternal receptacle for someone else's negativity, you are not helping them. You are enabling their lack of self-awareness while depleting your own spirit. Carl Jung reminded us that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. If you feel irritation or exhaustion after these interactions, it is your psyche trying to tell you that a boundary has been violated. You are not obligated to be the dumping ground for another person's unresolved trauma. True wisdom lies in recognizing that your energy is a finite resource, sacred, and worthy of protection. You must realize that being a good listener does not require you to surrender your voice. Realizing this is the first step toward breaking the cycle. You have to ask yourself why you feel compelled to endure these one-sided conversations. Is it a fear of being rude? Is it a need to feel useful? When you stop acting as the passive audience for their drama, you will find that these toxic magnets lose their power over you. You deserve relationships that are reciprocal, where your silence is respected as a part of your presence, not used as a tool for someone else's relief. By reclaiming your space and guarding your peace, you transform from a passive vessel into an empowered individual, grounded in the knowledge that your peace is too valuable to be traded for someone else's noise. 4. Patience is misread as permission. Have you ever wondered why, in your pursuit of solitude and peace, you seem to paradoxically attract the most chaotic and draining individuals? It is a baffling contradiction that many introspection seekers face. You retreat from the world to find harmony, yet the world brings its noise directly to your doorstep. This phenomenon is not a cosmic punishment, nor is it a coincidence. To understand this, we must look deeply into the psychological dynamics at play, particularly through the lens of spirituality and the insights of depth psychology. The answer lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of your nature. You see, there is a specific trait you possess, a quiet, observing stillness that you view as a virtue, but the toxic mind views as an invitation. We must explore why your greatest strength, your patience, is being weaponized against you. The root of this dynamic begins with how you, as a loner, or a person undergoing a spiritual awakening, process the world around you. You operate from a place of deep observation and profound empathy. When someone acts out, makes a mistake, or behaves poorly, your first instinct is not to judge or retaliate. Instead, you pause. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You look for the context, the hidden pain, or the shadow behind their actions, much as Carl Jung might suggest we look at our own shadows. You possess a high threshold for understanding because you are intimately acquainted with the complexities of the human soul. You wait to see if they will correct themselves, believing that everyone possesses the same capacity for self-reflection that you do. This silence is not emptiness. It is a full, vibrant space of patience and hope. You are holding space for them to be better, offering them a silent grace period to align with their higher selves. However, this noble trait holds a dangerous dark side when it meets the wrong frequency. While you are offering patience, the toxic individual is perceiving permission. It is crucial to understand that toxic personalities, narcissists, manipulators, and energy vampires do not speak the language of empathy. They speak the language of dominance and submission. When they act out and meet your silence, they do not see a wise soul contemplating the situation. They see a lack of defenses. They mistake your kindness for weakness and your silence for acceptance. In their eyes, if you do not immediately slam the door must be open. They interpret your benefit of the doubt as a green light to proceed with their behavior, unaware that you are merely observing them from a place of spiritual detachment. As this dynamic continues, the situation inevitably escalates because the toxic person will naturally seek to find where the actual boundary lies. Because you did not react to the first transgression, they feel emboldened to push further. It is like a tide slowly encroaching on the shore. With every wave that isn't pushed back, the water claims more land. They test your limits, not out of curiosity, but out of a compulsion to see how much they can take from you. They begin to encroach upon your mental and emotional sanctuary, assuming that your lack of outward resistance means you are compliant with their control. They cannot conceive that someone would voluntarily choose patience over conflict, so they assume you are simply incapable of fighting back. This is where the trap snaps shut. You are waiting for them to change, and they are waiting for you to stop them. Ultimately, this painful cycle is a harsh but necessary lesson on your path of spirituality. The realization you must come to is that your patience is a gift that must be earned, not a free commodity for those who wish to exploit it. In the process of your spiritual awakening, you are learning that protecting your peace is just as holy as being kind. The toxic person is drawn to you because your light is bright and your walls appear low, but they serve as a catalyst for you to build the necessary gates to your soul. You must learn that silence is not always the answer, and that sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to articulate a firm no. By understanding that your patience is being misread as permission, you can begin to close the gap between your intent and their perception, ensuring that your solitude remains a sanctuary, not a hunting ground for those who refuse to heal themselves. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay updated on your journey of self-discovery. Don't let toxic energy drain you any longer. Claim your self-worth now by typing, "I respect myself enough to say no." 5. The mirror effect. You may often find yourself bewildered by a cruel paradox. You are someone who seeks solitude, prefers the quiet company of your own thoughts, and deliberately avoids drama. Yet you frequently find yourself the primary target for toxic individuals. It seems counterintuitive that a person who asks for nothing more than peace would become a magnet for those who thrive on conflict. But the answer lies deep within the psychological phenomenon known as the mirror effect. When you stand firm in your solitude, you are not merely existing in a vacuum. You are radiating a frequency of stability and self-sufficiency that is blindingly painful for a toxic person to witness. Your ability to be alone without feeling lonely is a superpower. But to a person who is empty inside, that superpower looks like a threat. You possess a wholeness that they are desperately chasing but cannot find, and your very presence forces them to confront the void within themselves. This dynamic is rooted in the stark contrast between your internal world and theirs. You have cultivated a garden of peace, while they are living in a perpetual state of internal chaos and insecurity. When a toxic person looks at you, they do not see you as an individual. They see a mirror that reflects everything they are running from. Your silence is not empty. It is a clear, polished surface that reflects their unhealed wounds, their lack of identity, and their dependence on external validation. Carl Jung often spoke of the shadow self, the parts of us we refuse to acknowledge, and for the toxic individual, you become a living projection of the stability they lack. They cannot sit with themselves because they are terrified of what they might find in the silence. So when they see you sitting comfortably in your own silence, it triggers a deep-seated envy and resentment. They are insulted by your independence because it highlights their own desperate need for attention and control. Because this reflection is so painful for them, their defense mechanism kicks in, and they feel a compulsive need to lower your vibration to match theirs. They cannot rise to your level of spiritual development, so they attempt to drag you down to their level of dysfunction. This is where the subtle and insidious process of chipping away begins. To regain a false sense of power, the toxic person will try to dismantle your confidence piece by piece. They might make backhanded compliments, question your quietness as if it were a flaw, or try to interpret your boundaries as arrogance. Their goal is to create a crack in your self-esteem, a small opening through which they can inject their poison. If they can make you doubt yourself, if they can make you react with anger or sadness, they have successfully shattered the mirror. They have proven to themselves that you are just as chaotic and unstable as they are, which temporarily soothes their insecurity. However, understanding this mechanism is the key to your liberation and continued spirituality. You must realize that their attacks are not a commentary on your worth, but a confession of their own pain. When they try to provoke you, they are essentially begging for you to help them regulate their own turbulent emotions. By remaining the observer, a core practice in your spiritual development, you refuse to accept the invitation to their chaos. You are not being targeted because you are weak. You are being targeted because you are strong in a way they cannot comprehend. Your stability is a lighthouse, and while it may attract ships that are lost in the storm and looking to crash, it is your duty to remain the immovable rock. The moment you understand that their toxicity is a reaction to your light, you stop taking it personally, and the mirror remains unbreakable. 6. The empath trap. Have you ever wondered why, as someone who cherishes solitude and peace, you seem to constantly attract the most chaotic and draining individuals into your life? It is a paradox that frustrates many, but the answer lies deep within your own nature. You see, the very trait that makes you a profound thinker and a gentle soul, your empathy, is exactly what acts as a beacon for those who are emotionally destructive. In the realm of spiritual wisdom, we often talk about energy, and as a loner, you likely possess a high vibrational sensitivity that toxic people crave. You are not merely a person to them. You are a battery, a source of fuel. When you encounter a toxic person acting out, your instinct is rarely to run away or judge them harshly. Instead, because of your depth, you try to look beneath the surface. You see their pain, their trauma, and their unhealed wounds. As the great Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You are naturally inclined to look into that darkness, hoping to bring light to it. You try to understand them, and more dangerously, you try to fix them. You believe that if you just listen long enough, or love them hard enough, you can heal their brokenness. However, this is exactly where the trap snaps shut. This desire to be a savior, to be the one person who finally gets them, is what the toxic person exploits with surgical precision. They sense that you are different from the crowd. They sense that you will not reject them immediately like others might. They use your compassion against you, spinning tales of victimhood to keep you tethered to them. You might find yourself thinking, if I leave now, I am abandoning them just like everyone else did, and that guilt keeps you paralyzed in a cycle of abuse. It is vital to understand that this is not a relationship of equals. It is a parasitic dynamic. Carl Jung also famously noted that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But in this specific toxic equation, you are the only one being transformed, and usually it is for the worse. You are being drained of your vitality while they remain exactly the same, feeding off your desire to help. Furthermore, we must analyze why you stay. Often, the loner stays because they project their own goodness onto the toxic person. You assume that deep down, they have the same conscience and heart that you do. This is a dangerous spiritual error. True spiritual wisdom requires discernment, not just blind compassion. By trying to fix someone who does not want to change, you are essentially interfering with their own karmic path. You are taking on burdens that do not belong to you. The toxic individual knows that you value deep connection, so they will often mirror your depth in the beginning, making you feel as though you have found a soulmate, only to slowly reveal their true nature once you are emotionally invested. They weaponize your empathy, turning your ability to understand into a weakness. As the author Maya Angelou wisely cautioned, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Yet, the empathetic loner often ignores the first, second, and third red flag, making excuses for the behavior in the name of understanding. You must realize that you cannot love someone into health if they are committed to their own toxicity. Your solitude should be a sanctuary, not a waiting room for broken people to come and consume your energy. Realizing this is not about becoming cold or uncaring. It is about establishing the boundaries necessary for your own survival. You must learn to distinguish between those who need support and those who need a host. Carl Jung taught us about the shadow, the hidden, darker side of the human psyche. When you refuse to see the dark potential in others because you are too busy being empathetic, you are ignoring the reality of the shadow. To break this cycle, you must accept that some people are not looking for a healer. They are looking for a victim. By stepping back and reclaiming your energy, you are not failing them. You are saving yourself. You are honoring the spiritual wisdom that dictates you must first be whole within yourself before you can truly offer anything of value to the world. It is time to close the door to those who only know how to take, and open it only to those who know how to share. 7. Conflict avoidance. It is a profound irony of the human experience that those who seek silence the most are often the ones who attract the loudest chaos. And this paradox lies at the heart of why the solitary soul becomes a magnet for toxic energy. You might find yourself wondering why, despite your genuine intention to live a life of tranquility and minimal interference, you seem to constantly find yourself in the crosshairs of manipulative personalities. To understand this, we must look deeply into the nature of conflict avoidance, not as a weakness, but as a trait that, when viewed through the lens of spirituality, can be dangerously misinterpreted by those who lack your depth. For the true loner, peace is not merely a preference. It is a vital necessity, a sanctuary where the mind can expand and the soul can breathe. Consequently, you naturally detest drama and the shallow noise of unnecessary confrontation. When a minor disrespect or a subtle slight comes your way, your instinct is not to engage in a battle of egos, but to let it slide, believing that preserving your inner harmony is worth far more than winning a trivial argument. You choose the high road, assuming that silence is the most dignified response to foolishness. However, this very stillness, which is a sign of your maturity, is perceived entirely differently by the predatory nature of a toxic individual. Where you see a choice for peace, they see an open door. Where you feel you are being the bigger person, they perceive a lack of boundaries. It is crucial to understand that toxic people operate on a primitive frequency where dominance is the only language they speak fluently. When they test the waters with a small insult or a boundary violation, and you do not immediately push back with fire and fury, they do not interpret your silence as wisdom. Instead, they view your conflict avoidance as a green light, a tacit permission slip that signals it is safe for them to proceed with worse behaviors. They realize that the loner, in their quest for serenity, will tolerate a certain level of discomfort to avoid a fight. And like a thief finding an unlocked window, they decide to enter your life and dismantle your piece by piece. This dynamic becomes a perilous trap because the escalation is often subtle at first, masked by your own patience and capacity for forgiveness. You might tell yourself that it is part of your spiritual awakening to be tolerant, to see the good in others, and to rise above the fray. Yet, Carl Jung warned us that we must integrate our shadow that capacity for aggression and self-defense. Otherwise, we become victims of our own virtues. By consistently avoiding conflict to maintain a superficial peace, you inadvertently feed the ego of the toxic person, confirming their belief that you are a safe target who will absorb their negativity without consequence. They are drawn to you not just because you are quiet, but because your silence feels like a void they can fill with their own chaotic narratives. The toxic person realizes that because you are self-contained and perhaps isolated by choice, there is no one else around to witness their manipulation or come to your defense, making you the perfect vessel for their emotional projection. Ultimately, the lesson here is not that you must abandon your love for peace, but that you must learn to distinguish between peacefulness and passivity. A true spiritual awakening involves realizing that your energy is sacred and that protecting it sometimes requires the uncomfortable act of confrontation. The toxic person acts as a harsh mirror, reflecting the parts of yourself that are afraid to take up space or assert authority. When you understand that your conflict avoidance is the very magnet drawing them in, you can begin to shift your frequency. You learn that saying no and drawing a hard line in the sand is not an act of war, but an act of supreme self-love. By extinguishing that green light and showing that while you prefer peace, you are fully capable of defending your sanctuary, you break the cycle. You stop being a magnet for those who wish to use you and start becoming a magnet for those who respect the sacred silence you carry within. To affirm your readiness to speak your truth, even when it's difficult, state your commitment. Comment below, "I honor my voice," to own your strength and remind others that they are not alone in this journey. In the end, the solution isn't to stop being a loner, but to become a conscious one. When you integrate your shadow and assert your worth, You stop acting as a magnet for predators and start attracting only those who respect your depth. Protecting your energy is the most valuable currency you have. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a lesson on your spiritual journey.